So the Curves of the Needle brings together more than 20 artists, all exploring that sort of revival of interest that one can see from musicians in the kind of creation of vinyl records, but also the fact that artists and sculptors have always been fascinated by the kind of object nature of the vinyl record. It's called The Curves of the Needle. It's inspired by this title from Theodore Adorno writing back in the 1920s about the object nature of the kind of the black shellac record and the kind of elements of rotation, and just picking up on the kind of way that the needle moved towards the center. This sort of idea of a reproductive technology that's completely different, that has a kind of transformative effect. One of the fascinating things, I think, is just seeing how much interest there has been from a new generation in the kind of very particular nature of vinyl and the kind of album cover. So when thinking about this exhibition, it really did expand outwards from the idea of maybe the record collection and what the record collection meant. For example, with Graham Dolphin, knowing his passionate interest in record collections and the kind of very object nature of music, he suggested that he would go about curating a collection. And specifically, he developed these ideas of kind of trying to explore these eclectic visions of certain musical luminaries that he wanted to pick up on. So in particular, he's curated a display of Sundra records, of Bruce Haack, and of Jandek. I was very aware that actually there's been a lot of collaborations between musicians and artists, and if anything, that's accelerated with the idea that actually unique objects are created, that actually an artist brings to bear a different approach. That said, I was also interested in this idea that actually artists are interested in the mechanism of the record itself, the kind of sonic properties of the record, and also indeed dealing with things like broken records or fragmented records. So it's that sort of spirit of experimentation that was also really, really important. So with the plans for this exhibition, the possibility of working with Zoviet France, who've been active in the Northeast, and making really kind of handmade records since the early 80s, but also making releases more recently through working with independent label alt.vinyl in the Northeast. That sense of production that Zoviet France were involved in, of unusual materials, kind of takes it back to that object nature, in which actually real pride was taken into making something that was unusual and different. The idea that actually they would do a special set performance only using records that would be kind of altered, broken. The kind of real genius of that project was the idea of working with Lathe Revival to kind of cut onto 78s the whole of the performance. And that being able to witness the cutting of a piece of music whilst you're experiencing it, I think is a unique thing, and actually in a way brings together the sort of themes that kind of have been developed through the exhibition. The X-Ray Audio project is itself a kind of an art initiative and a research project. These were bootleg records that were recorded onto human X-rays. Their ongoing project really kind of picks up on this remarkable other history of music on the bone.
Have you ever heard two turtle doves, Bill and Sue, when they love?
The kind of ingenious Russians found ways in which actually they could cut onto these using a recording lathe, and basically being able to put popular music, things that actually weren't easily to be heard. It's unusual to think how music and music's reproduction was locked up in that way, and that lecture really brought that out.
On these records, these bootleg X-ray records, you really find three types of music: rock and roll and jazz. That's on there. But also, there's music by people like this. These are Russians. But you see, Peter Lushenko, Alla Belanova, they were part of what was seen as émigrés. They were émigré white Russians who'd either left after the revolution or another big wave left after the Second World War. So by leaving, they became, as Orwell would say, non-persons. They were traitors. They didn't come back to join the Great March Forward. So therefore, anything that they sang became forbidden. So what is an X-ray film, and how is it possible to record onto an X-ray?
Well, X-ray, I mean, we're talking about blank surface that's soft enough to take a groove.
Who would like to hear a live performance recorded Straits of XRay? Would you welcome Paul Smith?
One in a million, two is a crowd, three is company, four's not allowed. I spent all night trying to remember your address, drawing lines around your body, making marks on the mucky floor.
5 little fingers, 6-digit fix. My lucky 7, there are 8 steps to my hips.
When inviting Rhodri Davies to develop something for Curse of the Needle, I mean, instead of actually bringing his own work or his curated collection, he suggested that he'd like to do a kind of homage to Eliane Radigue, this French composer who's now in her 80s. And in fact, he suggested that we would do a presentation of Sigma. It involves a kind of recording of 4 singles 45s. It was first presented or staged in 1969 at the Festival de Como, and for this presentation it was recorded especially here in Newcastle in February. It was all recorded at 16 RPM, and so the piece lasts and presented over the 4 speakers in this installation, a kind of 2 hours and 2 minutes as a kind of whole cycle. It's fascinating to be able to sort of pick up on kind of the personal commitment that's there in terms of a story such as Alt.vinyls, in which it used to have a record shop just at the Westgate Road, but continues to work with a whole number of artists, including Rhodri Davies, Zoviet France, different experimental lathes, just unusual pressings, and picking up on an alternative music scene that crosses closely into the art. So the idea of working with Graham Dolphin, an artist based in the Northeast, that sense in which actually he reworks records or works with the kind of the album cover, and it kind of makes things of individual sculptural quality. That sort of fascination with the fan element of owning something. So here you've got Michael Jackson's Thriller pieced together, ripped up and reassembled in meticulous detail. Here you've got Daydream Nation, the Sonic Youth albums, but kind of completely fragmented and fractured. And people will know Graham Dolphin's work from the fact that he kind of meticulously inscribes the lyrics of records onto the surface in meticulous detail. So with this opportunity to kind of bring together this display of Sundra, an extraordinarily unusual artist, clearly Graham Dolphin was fascinated by the sort of unique nature of the designs and the kind of displays that Sundra would make. So he would collaborate with African-American publishers, printers. You get a real handmade quality to these records. When we conceived of this exhibition, we absolutely knew that we wanted to make a connection to Record Store Day, this annual date in April, where there's such a kind of exciting interest on new releases of vinyl records. So actually on Record Store Day itself, we had a whole range of events, including live cutting through Lathe Revival with a number of bands here in the space.
So I sat down and wrote her a letter. I sealed it with a fist. When that answer came back the next morning, what she said to me was this.
Also a fantastic presentation from DJs MTA, who works with old gramophones, and seeing a pair of gramophones playing music from a different time. We ended up the day with a fantastic 3-way conversation with Paul Harvey from the punk band Penetration, with Harry Pearson, and with Steve Drayton.
I started collecting very early, and I started collecting Mungo Jerry records, singles, but I couldn't afford to buy them new. I'd have to buy them second-hand. They were cheaper, but they never had the picture sleeves. So what I used to do was kind of make my own covers for them.
So I was pleased with this exhibition. There was a chance to work with Northeast writer Harry Pearson to kind of commission an essay really that looked at the kind of memories that he had of buying records growing up in Teesside, the kind of memory of going into record shops, but also just in a way looking at the history of the album cover itself, in a way to be able to kind of commission something where it would go into an album sleeve. This is a 10-inch. And it really explores the kind of personal memories that people might have of reading sleeve notes. Because clearly in the age of CDs and downloads, you just don't get that kind of information.